son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
All right, folks, welcome back. Once again, it is the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And if you dig the content, it really means a lot. Today, I'm super excited. This conversation, we're going in like 6-8 month cycles here, and I'm really liking that because it allows us some pretty quick and easy time to get caught up, even though it's a bigger chunk of time. I want to welcome back to the show one of my favorite guests and fourth time appearance, I think.
Third or fourth.
Mr. Ike Baker.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As I was saying off camera just a few minutes ago, it's genuinely a pleasure to talk with you and to hear from you. And I'm glad that the podcast is doing as well as it is, and you're breaking new ground. I've been keeping an eye on things.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And again, I'm super stoked and grateful that the podcast brought us together. Like, just me doing this allows us to have these conversations. You're easily one of the most interesting people I know. But on top of that, your knowledge and your ability to explain these these very detailed concepts in a way that a simpleton like myself can understand. To me, you're doing the Lord's work, and I really appreciate you taking the time always to chat with me about this stuff.
Well, I hope the Lord feels the same way.
Well, we'll have to wait and find out, I guess. You know?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could maybe just give the audience kind of a quick. You were out here in February. You gave an awesome lecture at the lodge. That night was sick. That whole day was super fun, just walking around Lower East Side. But if you just want to like kind of update people on what you've been up to the past year, and what things are tickling your fancy right now.
Sure. So we're moving forward towards the Egypt trip that's coming up in October 18th to the 26th. I'm leading a immersive excursion, 9 days through Upper and Lower Egypt, and it's called Techniques of Greco-Egyptian Theology. And so I'm going to be teaching on-site the history, theory, and practice of what are reconstructions of ancient forms of Greco-Egyptian ceremonial, really, for lack of a better word, magic with a K, as some people like to stylize it. But these, theurgy is something very particular, and I believe we've spoken about it before. It's the techniques of what we would call, ceremonial magic as applied to, as applied to spiritual, or really the evolution of the soul, the development of the soul. So it's not just kind of your run-of-the-mill money or garden magic, although that stuff is fun, that's cool too. But this is we're elevating our practice here, and I mean, that's why we're going all the way to Egypt to do it. We're going to be on site with 20 participants at temple complexes, private access to the Osirion at Abydos, the Temple to Hathor at Dendara, the Sekhmet Sanctuary of the Goddess, which is actually closed to the public. And so lots of other things. If anybody's interested in something like that, it's pretty late in the game, but you can feel free to reach out to me, ikebaker.com, ikebaker.com. Go there. There's a little chat widget, bottom right-hand side of the screen. If you're interested in that, you can read more about it on the website, or you can reach out through that chat widget directly to me. It goes directly to my inbox. Other than that, man, I'm working on a lot of books. Teaching, I do private instruction, I do public instruction. Tonight I'm offering, it's the first in a course comprised of 6 classes, Hermetic Kabbalah for initiates and practitioners. This is a deep dive, but it's from square one. So you don't need any pre-existing knowledge about the Kabbalah. We're doing a ground up sort of instruction, but it's going to progress over 6 sessions every other week from introductory to intermediate to advanced. And we're going to be covering things that, in my experience, have never been covered, taught, discoursed upon to this depth and this breadth in the public. I've never seen a public offering like this. So I'll be doing all sorts of practical teachings as well. That starts tonight. The next course I'm offering is in November. It's called Musica Universalis, Music as Magic. And so that is seven modules, a 7-module course covering Neo-Pythagorean harmonic cosmology that then dovetails into a magical practice, which is really the foundations of things like Neoplatonism and Neoplatonic theurgy, Hermetic theurgy, things like that. So I got a book coming, well, I don't know when it's coming out, probably 2020, end of 2026, beginning of 2027, most likely. Inner Traditions is putting it out. It's a book basically on esoteric examinations of mythology, really, and everything from Taoist cosmology to, of course, the ancient Greek and Greco-Roman sort of stuff, the Egyptian stuff, the Sumerian stuff, the Celtic and Old Norse myths, and showing where they have points of confluence and motifs that often go very overlooked. Now, we've seen a lot of that in comparative mythology over the years. It's almost it's too well worn. My thing is that I'm introducing people in this work. It's tentatively titled Mythology, very original, but I'm introducing.
It's a working title, you know?
Right? Well, and it's big and it's bold, and you got to have some brass balls in order to just say mythology. You know, that's my title. You're going to remember this. But I'm introducing people to the ancient philosophical traditions that interpreted these myths. So a lot of people think, you know, you did get people like the Theosophists and you know, a lot of the more new agey stuff, the anthroposophists of the early 20th century, doing all this mythological interpretation that was very subpar. What I've done is I've reached back into the ancient records and shown that ancient philosophers, this is the way they were interpreting their own myths. So it's not like this new agey thing. And I've shown the book is grouped, it's categorized not by like the type of myth or what, you know, it's literally like God and the gods, the cosmos is the next chapter, the soul. So it's actually taking the broader concepts of cosmology and metaphysics, and it's showing how they interpreted this mythology. And it's absolutely, you know, what I found just from researching was it was mind-blowing. Even for somebody like me, I'm not sure how many more times I can have my mind blown. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the next thing I was going to say. Is just like, how do you do this? How do you stay abreast of all these things on top of hunting down the very hard information, the very rare books? Like, how do you organize all of this in your mind in a way that allows you to teach the classes, write the books, and not just be completely overwhelmed by a sea of knowledge? Well,
this is a little bit of insider baseball here, but really what it's all about for anybody, because I'm not a gatekeeper. If anybody knows about me, I don't really seem to care about fucking job security, et cetera. And, you know, because at the end of the day, like we're in an age where like it's, you know, we're like post gatekeeping, you know, like we're beyond that now. There's no way to harbor this information and keep it to yourself from people. So I'm happy to share, but really it's all about two things: what I care about, what I care mostly about. And there's some nuance to that, right? Because a lot of that is you could really be hot for an idea. You could really be interested in something, but it's half baked.
Yeah.
You know, you don't, and so then, you know, there are certain things, sometimes a synchronicity or, you know, guidance, whatever you want to call it, will pull you away from that thing and towards a different subject and drop some info in your lap and pop some insight into your head. And other times it'll tell you, no, you're going to learn about this going through this process of research. And ultimately it's all about, you know, having that interest and the why. What am I really interested in? Because there's nothing I work on that I'm not very
100% invested in. Yeah, sure.
You know, I'm not doing like humdrum shit where it's just like, oh man, I got to write about whatever. But it's all very, very interesting to me, and it's this is the lens through which I view the world. So I don't have to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to think about Neoplatonism and Hermeticism and history. I see the world through that lens. I do it almost involuntarily. Automatically, I'll start thinking about, you know, it could be something as simple as a fucking plate of steak. You know, all of a sudden I was like, well, Porphyry says that we should avoid animal meat, you know, you know, but on the other hand, they did say that the Pythagoreans did eat all the flesh of which it was lawful to sacrifice. So the whole idea of Pythagorean cult being vegetarians is bullshit, you know, so like this is the way my brain works, and it's a really productive utilization of ADHD if you can. Yeah, right. You know, there you go. If you can like get it to do something for you instead of distracting you. I've learned how to keep myself focused on things, and to that point, the second half of that is optimizing your workflow. So I don't spread myself thin. I do things with. I attack them from multiple angles. So I take a few private students, right? A couple of them want to learn about theurgy, and another, let's say, two of them want to go through the theurgic curriculum of the Platonic dialogues, right? So no practical theurgy, but we're going, that was a prerequisite in the Iamblician and you know, post-Iamblician, the schools of Proclus, and the later scholarchs of the Athenian Academy. They say, okay, we got this system of reading and these virtues that you have to go through this reading. You have to acquire these virtues before you can practice theurgy, right? You have to go through that initiation phase. Sure. In order, you can't just call yourself a theurgist. It doesn't work like that. Because theurgy is a lifestyle, and the theurgist has to, you know, purify themselves, which essentially means not have so many material inclinations pulling at them constantly and successfully derailing them. That is purification. Purification is I'm not compelled by any material thing. Okay. Yeah. And so philosophy does this. Okay, that's the practice of philosophy, the contemplation of philosophy. And along these tracks, there are 12 Platonic dialogues in a sequence called the Ladder of Virtues. And you acquire these 6 or 7 virtues, and then you get to practice theurgy. So I've got like students going through that. I've got other students going through practical techniques of theurgy. I made a theurgy video for the Arcanum channel. What is theurgy? I do a huge deep dive on it. And then not only that, but I'm writing a book, a manual on practical theurgy, and I've got this Egypt trip coming up. So all of this work, all of this work is getting done, and I'm getting paid to do all of it. Even the research with the students, right? I mean, so you got to compound. You have to compound your workflow. There's got to be multiple avenues in which you're drilling this shit home, because what that does is it allows you to carve time out. And if I'm doing research and if I'm compiling information for a student, I have got to do that right. And then let alone sit there for an hour, 2 hours, twice a month with them. You know, I'm not going anywhere. We're focusing. We are focused on the theory. So it's all about this symphony of workflow. And I recommend, no matter what field you're in, you really should. You know, that's the only way to get anything done anymore. Because, you know, in order just to survive, you've got to have like a lot of. You have to have several different streams of income, unless you know you've got some crazy tech job.
Well, and even then, you know, a lot of those people with those crazy salaries are trying to do something on the side and hoping that it takes off, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's crazy, but yes, I completely agree with that. I mean, that all makes sense. It's just amazing to me the amount that you're able to do And still, you know, but again, it's because you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
You live and breathe this stuff. So it's not like a humdrum job.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't like to sit in front of my books because I think it's pretentious and obnoxious. But I am literally sitting at the only wall that doesn't have a bookshelf in my library. I do all my courses, I do all my interviews in my library. So I have collected a research library of serious materials. I have over 500 volumes like in this room right now with me. And and I have everything categorized and then alphabetized by author. It's not because I have like some neurosis. I had to do that recently because when you're in the middle of writing for something and you need to pull a resource, you can't
go digging through 500 books.
It'll drive you nuts. And then you'll get back and be like, what was I even writing about? You know? So I've got to know where it is. So that too, you know, just like having the available means, because a lot of people do internet research and that is fucking bad. It's not good. I got news for you. It's one of the worst fucking ways you can train your brain to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I 100% agree with that. And I think we're seeing the disease of that affect basically all levels of society. You know, social media is just one aspect of it, but now it's kind of bled into even politics at the highest level. So,
oh yeah, yep.
You know, scary stuff. I also saw you've been hitting the gym. You trying to get swole?
Oh, dude, I was an athlete my whole life, man. I went to music school on a lacrosse scholarship. I boxed.
Amazing.
I've always been in the gym, but I gained probably about 35 pounds last year, and it was not good for my spiritual practice. Not good for my, I am a busy guy. And
sure.
you know, when you get to the age like I'm at or where we're at, I'm approaching 40.
We need clean energy.
You do. You need energy for your brain to work. Like so it's like, I really had to start figuring out ways to push myself, take care of myself again, because it got really, really bad and uncomfortable. And a lot of that had to do, frankly, with stress.
Sure.
I've never been so stressed in my entire life as I have the last 3 years, on top of doing all this and writing multiple books at one time, and podcasts, documentaries, travel, teaching. I bought a house in the last couple of years, and that's a whole other job in and of itself.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, again, I would admonish people, if you're serious about spiritual practice, the body has to be trained as well as the mind.
Well, that's kind of why I was bringing it up, because I was glad to see that you were taking your health more seriously. Anyone who's willing to commit that time always gets my kudos. I was never really a big sports person, a real active person, but I bucket handle tore my meniscus.
Ooh.
And I was out, like, basically right at the beginning of COVID. I got one of the last knee surgeries in New York City before they shut the whole city down. And so that wasn't that bad. But in the process of healing, I realized like how out of shape I was and how weak, how much more difficult my physical therapy was because I was weak. And I had really no excuse other than laziness. And then after that PT, this was in like 2021, like when I finally started to really heal from that, I started making, that is a practice for me. That happens 4 days a week, hour and a half. I'm not trying to get ripped. I'm just trying to get my heart rate up and build some strength. I do like a TRX push-ups. Mm-hmm. I don't know. To me, there was a moment probably after I'd been doing it for a year where I recognized it as a ritual. Yeah. And once I recognized it as that, I don't care. There's days where I don't want to do it, but I do it. You know what I mean? And just like what you said, we're getting old. Things are going to start to break. And the more we can front load our recovery by investing even just a little bit of time into our health, physical activity, sunshine, something, you know, something good physically for the body. I don't know. To me, it's like definitely a critical component. It should not be overlooked. And I overlooked it for way too long.
Well, I mean, part of what did it too, on top of the stress, because that's the way I self-soothe is I eat. But also another part is like sitting in front of a computer for hours a day. I had never done that in my life. I have always had a job that required manual labor. And in other words, I was a bartender or a carpenter or a massage therapist or a physical therapy assistant. I was always on my feet. And then now I'm like, I'm literally writing 3 books at the same time. And so I'm spending hours on the computer. So what I had to do was I had to do a little bit of time management tweaking. And so I get up every morning and me and my fiance go to the gym together. And then I'll usually return at the end of the day to either run or just get rid of that last bit of energy so that I can get to sleep. So, you know, that's another thing for people that do what, you know, things like you and I do, whether it's music production or engineering or whether it's podcasting or whether it's writing or researching. You know, I studied. I've been studying for about a year and a half Hebrew Kabbalah with David Chaim Smith, and he and I did a series called Re-envisioning Kabbalah. We got a lot of really good feedback on it. Really good. I kind of moderated and led the discussion, asked questions, etc., while David kind of explained this stuff for people. But one of the things David told me off camera was like, get the fuck out of that chair and move your ass. You know, he's like, because he's in his 50s and he's having heart problems and things like that. And he's like, you do not want to fall into this trap this early. So actually the girl who does like video editing for the series, a friend of ours, she sent me the clip of David saying, get the fuck out of that chair and move your ass. And I set it as an alarm ringtone. And it's just, I was like, okay, I got to be done writing for now. I'm going to the gym.
Yeah, no, dude, that's amazing. When I saw you posting about that, I was like, nice, good for you. It sucks. It's not enjoyable. Like it hurts. It's sweaty, but you're not doing it for your present you. You're doing it for your future you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you can get caught up in this idea of gains or loss, right? Either weight loss or muscular gain, you know, gaining in strength. Those are all good things just to keep your eye on it. It's kind of like finance. Right, the more you check your bank account, the more you look at your statements, the more you review your pay stubs, you're just turning your attention to that. Your bank account's going to grow.
Yeah,
it's just that's how that works. So you put your focus into things like that, but you really, if that's what you're lusting after, you can't really turn it. It's going to be harder to turn into a lifestyle. I run and lift weights as literally because I know I need the discipline. Yeah. So that's the great thing about running and lifting weights. It doesn't get easier. It just never does. So it's like I have this thing, this wall I'm going to constantly be pushing against, and it's going to keep me disciplined.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Love that. You know, there's I don't want to get too far down this tangent, but I've been spending a fair amount of time over the past 6 months looking into, like, literally the light from computers, the light from screens, flickering blue light, and stuff that is disrupting about our biological processes. And there's a bunch of pretty unhinged people that talk about this stuff, but there's a bunch of legitimate doctors with pretty sobering takes on it, and it's kind of scary. You know, again, not to say that it was any of the technology or the screens or some like control mechanism that was given to us for our obedience, but to think that staring at the screens doesn't have some kind of negative impact on like the biological processes in our body. I think there's more science coming out saying that, yeah, it does. It has really bad effects on your biological processes, and you need sunlight. You need like full spectrum infrared. And that's, staring at a computer, we don't get that. So
yeah, most of the time when I'm wearing glasses, it's because they're blue blockers.
Yeah.
I've been reading the literature for quite a long time. I mean, they right out of the gate, university scientists found that prolonged exposure to blue light gave brain tumors to lab rats.
Yeah.
So I am weary and leery of this this thing, but I part of getting healthy was actually learning to be off of the phone.
Yeah.
Again, which is, I didn't have a smartphone until I was 27. All right, my dad would buy me flip phones when I was in college, so he'd keep in touch with me, and I would like get I'd be in New York, I'd go back upstate to college, I'd throw the fucking thing in the lake because I didn't want anybody to be able to get in touch. It's like a tether, it's a mobile tether. So it's just so ass backwards now, the way where it's like people nowadays, they don't even want privacy. Kids are not going to know what privacy is. They're going to be like, privacy? Yeah. That's lame. Why would I want privacy? I want people to know who I am. I want people to know what I'm doing. I want to be an influencer, So it's like, I had this awesome meal. I went on an awesome date. I'm going to post about it. Why would I want privacy? Whereas I needed it. I still need it. And, up until 4 years ago, even I had a flip phone and I was, using MapQuest to like get around. It's a great thing for other people, I think, that I'm doing what I'm doing, but it's not a good thing for me. To be literally bolted to this fucking machine for hours because I have no other way of putting a book together. My publishers do not accept typewritten typewriter submissions. It's got to be a Microsoft Word. So, there's that component where, I let myself kind of just fall back into it and be like, oh, screw it. If I'm going to be online, then I got to be at least, in there posting. And it was not good for my mental health, therefore not good for my physical health. And now, so part of, getting healthy is when I go out, I leave my phone at home.
Yeah.
Unless I'm going someplace completely alone, if like I'm going for a walk in the woods by myself or something like that. But if I'm out with my fiance to the gym or to, wherever we go out to dinner, I leave my phone at home because it's just, it breaks apart the attention span too. It really does. This compulsive checking. All right, what? You don't even know why. You just keep picking the phone up.
Well, we're obedient to it now. Yeah. That's for sure.
It's this very, very odd, slavish compulsion. And we went for a date the other night, and we went out for date night, and I left my phone at home, and Nicole's really good about. She's never really on her phone, but. We were sitting next to this couple, and the entire time they were both on their phones. The guy had an earpiece. He had like an earbud in.
Watching a game or something. Yeah,
What the fuck is going on? What's happening? We're retreating into these little bubbles of convenience and self-satisfaction and and what's happening is it's literally ripping us apart. So now, they use the bullshit. The internet connects people, does not connect people. Okay. Especially not with social media and the way that we're consuming, these 30-second, 15-second clips and stuff. Now it's, if anything, you can be alone in a room with somebody and you're still not there with them. So it's actually creating a bubble. We're sealing ourselves off. And what's really interesting, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. When I first started leaving my phone at home, the first thing that I realized was how beautiful everything is. We went and got coffee and just sat in a rose garden in Charlotte, and McGill Rose Garden. And I had nothing to do but sit there with my cup of espresso, and just look at this big tree that was in front of me, and I just was like I almost lost my breath. I'm like, oh my God, it's beautiful. It's the color, the contour. I mean, I'm looking around, I'm almost completely overwhelmed by how beautiful everything is, because I'm becoming one with those things again by being present in the moment.
Yeah.
And there's so much more there than a visual, physical beauty. There's a connection that happens, and it's always happening. It's just whether or not you're tuning into that connection. And we tune out of our connection, our energetic connection to the physical world around us. So when we tune back in, there's the beauty, there's the peace, there's the calm that everyone is looking for. You are not going to find it. Everybody's waiting for good news. That's over. That's not happening ever again. There's no more good news.
Yeah, it's just terrible shit.
Because, and it's not because everything sucks. It's because that doesn't sell. Nobody gives a fuck. It serves the purpose. I'll say it. I don't care if you don't.
No, that is real.
I will say it. It does not serve the agenda of our current social programming.
Totally. Yeah.
So there's no more good news. It's over. But I've got good news for you. Tune out of that horse shit and tune back into the ever-present beauty and connection that is always around us, Yeah. So that's some stuff.
I mean, I completely agree. That shit is slow drip opium. I mean, even again, like studies showing now that people are literally addicted to this stuff the same way they're addicted to a drug.
Yeah.
And it's, chasing a dragon. There's nothing on there is cooler than what's happening in reality around you at any point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's amazing. I love that take.
Yeah. Yeah. But, well, being in, somebody in recovery, I could tell you right out of the gate, it's very similar to being addicted to a substance.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like that is, whether that was intentional or an unintentional byproduct, that is what it is right now. People are straight up addicted to it. It's becoming more of the Wall-E scenario, The machines will take care of everything. I don't have to think. I just sit here and consume.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I also, but the reason I have always balanced it is because it's just like the technology allows us the flexibility. I don't know. I just try, when I interface with technology, I try to make it deliberate. Mm-hmm. If I don't need to be on my phone, I won't. I'll save things until I'm sitting at my computer. I play a lot of guitar just to physically not be able to touch technology. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think those are really healthy, mental and physically healthy practices for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I take inspiration from one of my friends and the people that, a guy that I've had on the podcast a few times. I won't mention him by name, but some people probably know who this is. But he's one of the most prolific writers, in the world, most likely, and, just in general. And, he salvages old computers because they're really, really toxic when you just throw them in a, like the old school PCs, when you throw them in a landfill, they're extremely toxic. So he salvages those, and he's got a computer, and that's connected to, the internet, and that gets turned on when he needs to write, when he needs to do emails. And if you want to do a you got to give him a number that he calls in from his landline. And does not have a cell phone. We were hanging out. Well, we were meeting for a particular thing, a group, an order thing, and the guy who was it was up north, and we were all traveling, and the guy who was sort of in charge of the weekend had to go pick him up from the train station. He was like, he doesn't have a cell phone. Like, how am I going to know when he's there? All this other stuff. And we get back, they get back, and we're like, oh, we're glad he found you. And the guy who, doesn't have a cell phone just goes, wow, I wonder what people did all these hundreds of years. How did anyone ever get picked up from a train station?
It's a good point. I mean, it's a real good point.
Yeah. So
it is scary. My wife's been doing this thing too, and I think it's hilarious. She's been doing this thing where whenever she interfaces with somebody older or younger and they have a problem like navigate, even though they've grown up using technology, they have a problem navigating it. She kind of equates it to were they born before 9/11 or after 9/11? And it's like a pretty accurate
interesting
division, because it's like the people before 9/11 who were born before 9/11 remember the world before. That was before cell phones really took over. It was definitely before a lot of the aggressive security state stuff started happening.
For sure.
And then the people born after 9/11, they just don't know that world. And so they maybe don't see it like we see it because it's all they've known, you know? And it's not to say there are a fair amount of them that are trying to tune out of that programming, for sure. But it's just crazy to think that there's people that don't know. They didn't live it. We had the last little bit of whatever freedom existed before this. So
yeah, and I would say that I was lucky, but growing up in the first third of your life having that freedom, and then watching it slowly be stripped away, and everyone fucking smiling and clapping as it's happening. I mean, that is not a lucky situation to be in.
Yeah,
some days I just look up and I'm like, you kidding me? Why me? But why not is a better question. Why not? I mean,
that's the spirit.
So, because it's people that I think are aware of how this like Hegelian dialectic has seized people and has gotten its tentacles as far into their skull as it can possibly go. We need to be around. Can you imagine what it would be like if it was just a bunch of automatons right now?
Yeah,
if it was just these unaware, unself-aware, thinking that they're great. There was a quote, I forget who said it, but I read it the other day, and it said, if you make people think that they are thinking, they will love you. But if you make people think, they will hate you.
Pretty good. Pretty accurate.
And, so it's like there does need to be thinkers, people who are actually capable of the much, the much touted idea of critical thinking. Then you should be critical of everything. Science doesn't get a pass. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they don't get a pass. Everything is viewed critically. Yeah. Everything is viewed critically. Magic, ceremonial, that doesn't get a pass. It's everything must be viewed critically. And instead people, they what they do is they align themselves with groups and parties and people that claim to be critical thinkers. And then they rest on their laurels and they just adopt the party line. Now, I don't even just mean that in a political way. I mean, like it's diffused through everything. I mean, it's fandom, it's what it is. We've been so trained in fandom that, it's like, this is how we operate now. If I like this anime, if I like this sports team, if I like this political party, it's just fandom.
Yeah, I've definitely gone on a million tirades about that same idea.
Good.
I as you're saying it, I think it's funny too, because it's like the things. Here's a situation where the things that we read and the philosophers, the critical thinkers, they infected us. Now I see why they're dangerous, and they were always dangerous for society because. In a time where it's like crazy to have a thought, to even spend time thinking, like thought is one step away from being a crime at this point. It is just funny that of course we're like this. Of course we're like this because these are the things that we read. These are the things that helped me make sense of a world that I just could not make sense of.
Yeah, and this is the final onslaught. It's the final assault. Is the impulse of control and the impulse of domination and tyranny has reached its final chimeric form. In that, for centuries, it's always been about destroying the truth. We got to destroy the truth. We burn the books and we do this and we create a new narrative, and the human spirit keeps finding and claiming its free will. So now the project is, clearly, we can't destroy the truth. What we have to do is completely destroy their ability to see it.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening now. That's the final play, because if this don't work, nothing will.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, it is interesting. Again, it's we live in the age of 100%. We live in the age of the death of truth. It's real crazy. I remember a time pre 9/11 where there was big T capital truths. There were hard points that we could grab onto for some certainty. Mm-hmm. And since 9/11, it's been a steady erosion of all those things and the general idea, like you're saying. So,
yeah,
I don't know. It's not to say that it's scary. There is always hope. But I've always looked at it as like, it's pretty exciting that I'm alive at this time.
Yeah. And, all the greatest, right? I'm talking about, I'm writing this mythology book, this, sort of esoteric examination of mythologies. And the greatest stories always have, that 11th hour motif. And that's why there's always hope. There's not always hope because humans are going to, or whatever, the good guys, quote unquote, if you want to think that reductively, it's not because they are better equipped. It's not because they are more skilled. It's not because they outnumber the bad guys. It's all the opposite of those things. It's always an underdog story. There's always more people who love lies than people who love truth, and are willing to talk about it. It's always been that way. It always will be that way, which you have to then think that it's actually not an imperfection of the system. And I'm talking about creation as a whole now. It's not
an aberration.
It's not that, if we could just all get on the same page, we could make a utopia.
Yeah.
That's clearly not the point. This is much more like a panic room, where it's like you're put in here for this purpose to be in this war between darkness, which is always signified ignorance, and light, which is always signified gnosis or higher knowledge, right? And so we're put here as the individual, in a kind of RPG, sort of first person player perspective, and trying to work this out. And the thing is, if you don't leave hope as part of the equation, it means that you're not leaving chance as part of the equation. And chance, that is the little door where God's hand can slip through. All the greatest stories, the heroes don't overcome the bad guys. It looks like luck.
Yeah.
It looks like luck. Look at it, Lord of the Rings. They get all the way to fucking Mount Doom. Frodo's like, no. You're like, what? What? No, I'm not. And because he didn't kill Gollum, they end up both wrestling for it, neither of them with intentions to destroy it. and it just so happens to fall in with Gollum, and that's how it, in Star Wars, it's another really good example is, how does he destroy the Death Star? He turns the computer off.
Right.
So there's too many people thinking we're going to do this by leaving the computer on. And that's not how it works. It's never worked that way. You look at the biggest, most important stories, and it's always chance, because chance is where God operates. And everything else is you getting in the fucking way.
Love that. No, that's great. I completely agree. Hope is strong, dude. Hope. For me, the hope that I can get better at something is the energy that I get to do it, to consistently show up to something. So, I'm definitely of the mindset that we're not all just gonna. If we could all just gonna, well, we're not all just gonna. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I've said this my whole life. I would prefer an uncomfortable truth to a comfortable lie. But like you're saying, most people prefer the uncomfortable, or the comfortable lie. Did I say that right? Yeah, comfortable lie. There we go. Yeah.
They prefer the comfortable lie because, it's too many people want to avoid suffering. And then they'll look at others that go head first, lean into the suffering, and they'll look at them glutton for punishment. Look at how smug and self-righteous they are. And it's like, no, you don't realize it about this. It's a fundamental ignorance on the part of the comfortable and the comfort hungry, is that none of this gets any easier. Like your emotional life, your mental life, your spiritual life erodes when you're comfortable. And that is a greater punishment than anything physical that can happen to you. And whereas when you lean into the suffering, you learn how to overcome, right? You learn to bear the weight. It doesn't get easier. You get better at carrying it. And that is, if there is a purpose to existence, that is literally it. We are here to, be in this mix of opposites. This constant war of opposites, night then day. It's the opposites that make this machine, this, as Peter Mark Adams calls it, this teleological machine of the universe. It's what makes it go. It doesn't work. It's on anything else. It's predicated on a fundamental polarity. And there's things that are harmonious about it ultimately. And then there are things from the perspective of the human where it's that interaction of opposites is not so harmonious. But you've got to be there, and you've got to learn to be there and not retreat from that battle all the fucking time. It's ultimately it becomes funny. It really does. There's that Greek a tragicomedy or a comic tragedy, right? It's like a person's life is a tragedy, but you pull out and the story of humanity is a comedy. It's just one of those things where you really, I hate to be so reductive as to say it's either this or that, but at the end of the day, right, like at the end of the day, we're only making one of two choices, and that's to lean in or to run away. That's it. Because even if you're like trying to occupy this third position where I'm not getting involved, it's like you're still running away. You either choose the path of engagement or the path of non-engagement. And actually, one of the poisons of the westernization of Eastern spirituality has been in this idea of the Western interpretation of like a Buddhist non-attachment. It's not, this stuff wasn't being written for cam girls and for, fucking NASA scientists, and for, whatever, CNN pundits. This was being written for basically fucking farmers and people who lived in castles, because that's all there was back then. We're a different, it's really funny. I'm not trying to be blasphemous, but I do occasionally catch myself thinking, like, you got all this stuff about, turning the other cheek, and it's like, I wonder sometimes, what would Jesus say if he met someone that was involved with Antifa? Or what would he say if he met somebody who was involved with, I don't know, the Proud Boys or something like that? Like, what those types, the archetypes existed, but we live in a very different world than back then. It's like, okay, yeah, this person, fundamentally, there's a zeal that was present in where we get the term, the zealots, of which Judas Iscariot was a member, and these political factions of the Essenes and the zealots going on there. But, they didn't all have access to, the world's most powerful information machine. They didn't have these, college 4-year degrees that are essentially just proof they've been brainwashed and things like, it's a much more complex situation, modern people. And it's like, this is not the time for quietism. It's not the time to just go and sit up on the mountain and meditate. There has to be, you got to make a choice at this point.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
And I agree. You do. Otherwise, you're just going to get sucked into whatever is trying to be sold to you. I don't know. I think people have always, there's always been like a team mentality. I want to be on a team. I want to be in a team, but it's just getting so, most people when they get into a cult, they don't realize they're in a cult.
Yeah.
But they exhibit cult behavior. And there's so many layers of cult behavior that I see in just general population that it's just, I don't know, maybe we just crave for the cult, dude. Maybe we can't stay away. We just have to go to it.
Well, the thing is that a human being was formerly called the religious animal. We are religious. That's what it is. We're religious about something. Atheists are religious about atheism.
Sure, yeah.
Scientists or people who subscribe to scientism are religious about scientific materialist reductionism, right? We all obsess and feel strongly about things to a certain degree. But the thing is, that work that's ultimately done of light versus dark and being the mediator between them by being present and being aware, that only happens inside of you. It's only the individual accomplishes that. It's not some great war at the bottom of, Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo. It's not that, the battling on the slopes of Mount Doom. It's that inside of you. And that's where you have to engage with that work. And it should be the most important thing that you do in your life. And you should attach a sense of urgency to it, that is prioritized above almost everything else. And so that's what I mean when I say people will have to make a choice. It's not about what team you're playing on. It's about, what am I going to bring into the world? You look at things like Christ. I say, well, Christ was incarnated. But you also look at what led up to the Christ event. And you see things like Mithras, and you see things like Serapis Christos. It's another Christ. You see all these sort of similar ideas happening because that spirit entered into the collective consciousness. And people began embodying those ideals, prioritizing those ideals, and caring and telling those stories, caring for those ideals and telling those stories. Okay. And at the same token, you have, on the other end of the spectrum, the Scarlet Woman, the Whore of Babylon, and you have the Antichrist. It's not people. It's not a person. It's people, is what I should say. It's not a person. It's people. People are vociferously anti-Christian at this point. And there are even, people who are not Christian that there are religious people who shun that ideal because it's become so politicized and so vilified. Christianity is, done misdeeds, but none more than every other, ethno-political religious group.
Yeah, sure.
It's like it's not guilty of anything to any extreme that other groups are not guilty of. It's just whether or not you're aware of that and whether or not you're willing to admit that, because a lot of us, we create very sophisticated arguments against things that we have a personal problem with.
Yeah.
Well, Christians bothered me. There was one guy, or there were three guys, or there was two women, or it was this one particular church I used to go to. And you take that, and this is what college teaches you to do. You stack up evidence to indict the entire organization, and then you find like minds, and you just scream all that stuff at the opposition, and it's, you're not, what you've done is you've traded in one lie for another.
You're right.
You've gone from one extreme to another, and you've allowed your reactionism to unbreakably tie you to create, because now that's how you are. Your anti-Christian ideal is how you are defining yourself, and you are tied identity to Christianity for the rest of your life until you decide to just let go of that. But you have things like Antichrist and Scarlet Woman, and I just encourage listeners to think about, what's going on in the public, the masses. What are they doing? Are they acting like the Whore of Babylon? Are they acting like Antichrist? And I'm not saying, just look at what these things are symbolically trying to tell you. It's about an embodiment. Okay. We're embodying these ideals. And the question is that you ask yourself every morning, what am I going to embody? What am I going to embody? That's the battle. That's where it's won. That's where it's lost. And it happens every moment. So it's not really about which side you're on. It's a personal decision to say, I am going to embody this, this is my reasoning. And then doing that. If you want to talk about like spiritual evolution and yada, yada, catharsis, purification, that's all it is. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. And definitely not, I wouldn't say common. It's not a common thing, This might be a simple segue into the next little area here. So I'll agree with you that there's definitely, in terms of religion right now in America, at least, the belief or engagement with religion, traditional religion, is at an all-time low for sure. But I have been noticing a strange development in, as we were talking about before we started the show, in like the alien space. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of people who are coming forward now trying to draw very strict lines to religion between aliens. And let me just give you a bit of context.
Please.
So I don't know if you're familiar with a documentary called Mirage Men.
No.
Mirage Men focused on this guy named Richard Doty. And Richard Doty worked for the Air Force or the Army in psychological operations, counterintelligence, and his job was to seed misinformation about UFOs to people in the UFO community in the 80s and 90s, because the military was concerned that with more people talking about UFOs, people would come out to the bases, take pictures of actual classified planes, and reveal that information. So Doty's whole job was to seed misinformation into that space as a cover for legitimate technology that humans were developing. It was not aliens. Okay. Paul Benowitz was this guy who was pretty vocal. He leaked a bunch of information to him and ended up driving him crazy. And he was like committed to an institution. But the whole reason I'm saying that is because there's a whole thing that's happening in that space right now where everyone is getting so fed up with the deception that they're finally starting to ask the question, should I believe this person's story? But, you know, that documentary came out 15 years ago.
Okay.
Right. There is kind of what we were talking about before about like critically listening to everyone, not just picking a team and then believing whatever is told to you on that team.
Right.
That in a microcosm is that split is occurring in the UFO space right now. But where it gets to the religious crossover is there's a few people that have come up basically trying to make some kind of connection with like John Dee, Enochian magic stuff. There's a couple big writers who are they come from a background in religion, but they're trying to put the emergence of the alien topic as its own religion.
Well, yeah, because they see that it's trending and they want to sell their books.
100%, 100%. And there's also this other guy named Chris Bledsoe who his whole thing is he's been communicating with these beings and they're angels. And because of all of this talk about esotericism and religion and aliens, there's been like a renewed interest in it. And I don't know what to make of it in the sense that's like, could there be a connection there? Is there a connection there? Or is this just a tool to get us to stop talking about technology that our government has? It's just an extension of some kind of thing to get us looking somewhere else.
Look at what's going on now. Every day there's some sort of the Earth is spinning slightly faster, the solar flare, the Earth's magnetic field, the axis is tilting, the polar ice caps are melting.
Armageddon vibes.
There's an asteroid that's coming really close to the Earth. That thing may even be an enemy spaceship. They're trying to scare you.
Sure.
Whether it's a
100%.
distraction or not, what they need is they need you to be afraid. The same way they needed you to be afraid during that time period, which we shall not mention a couple of years ago. Because when people are afraid, they can't fucking think.
Yeah.
They can't think. It's just fear. And you know what? You know what's waiting for them? When they ought to have that knee-jerk reaction and all rationality and a sense of composure and getting space between the thought and the news, you know what's waiting for them? Pre-selected fucking, here's the answer. Oh, here you go.
Yeah, right.
You know, there you go. Okay, so here's this. Hey, you're scared? Look what we got. Well, look, we just so happen to have.
Just buy this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Buy this or do this, or hey, it's this person's fault. You know, it just puts you in a state of irrationality. Now, as you were telling me this, I just wrote down here on a little thing, a couple of the points that I want to take you through. There's six points that I want to discuss in this overarching thing. And, you know, just for full disclosure for anybody that's listening, I had no idea what James was going to ask me until we got on at 10 o'clock, 10:07, to just say hi to each other. But so this is all very stream of consciousness here. But I'm critical about everything. I think about everything.
Sure,
if you have a question, anyone, I have probably spent several hours at least, like mulling this thing over in my head in the course of my life, because it's just what I do. It's a habit. It's a habit of thought, is that I take things and I pull them apart.
Break it apart.
I put them back together and I hold them here and what's it look like over there, and then contextualize them, bring everything together. Well, how does this match up against this? And to a lot of people that is exhausting. And yeah, it is. But I can't, my brain doesn't work any other way. So the first thing is that why do we need to reduce religion to aliens? Materialism. We're no longer comfortable thinking in what we call superstitious post-enlightenment terms. What is a spiritual being? What is an apparition? What is the soul? It's like, well, these are very clearly delineated, and there's a very long list of those incidences that you can, if you so choose, go and research. But most people will just dismiss these ideas a priori. Now, for others, it will loom in the background, this unanswered question, right? We don't know what it is. But the main thing is that we are viewing everything through an ingrained and habituated perceptual filter called materialist reductionism. It is the overarching intellectual paradigm of our time, whether it's in art, whether it's in music, whether it's in the academy, whether it's in movies, this constant push for you to get on the rationalist train. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of fucking holes in that train. There's a lot of holes in that train. You know, we don't think we know what we think we do. So getting on that train wholesale is what we were talking about before, choosing the comfortable lie and aligning yourself with a group of people who claim to be critical thinkers, and therefore you just fucking swallow whatever gruel.
Don't question it at all.
Or slop they're feeding you. Wow,
right
these people look really smart. He's got a cool haircut, horn rimmed glasses. He seems gentle. You know, I want to be like that guy. He sounds very sophisticated. It's a pleasing aesthetics. And it's something easy to get on board with because nobody really gives a fuck about like getting to the truth. People it's this idea of like, look, if I argue right, I am right. And everybody just wants to be right.
Yeah.
You know, because to be wrong nowadays is to be a fool. It's to have your pants pulled down and have everybody laughing at you. I don't mind being wrong. I may look back in 10 years at this conversation and be like, oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because my intentions are sincere. I know what I'm after. Yeah, and I'm not going to find it in a group. You know, so I'm not going to find it with a group. So that's the whole thing. Materialist reductionism forces us to take spiritual ideas that we're uncomfortable with because they're implying a disembodied intelligence. And we say, oh, well, no, it's physical. No, we found it. They just didn't understand. It's a physical thing. And now we can explain it. And now it fits more comfortably into this postmodern, materialist, reductionist, perceptual filter that we're constantly trying to shove everything into.
Everything, yeah.
You know, everything goes through that filter. I see people every fucking day that come to my classes and watch my videos and tell me about it, and they're trying to understand the esoteric with their exoteric mind.
Yeah.
That does not work. You have to abandon that ship. Now, that doesn't mean that you leave it forever, but you got to understand there's a different methodology of perceiving the world. And that one ultimately is what we would essentially call the ancient worldview. And I'm going to explain some of this ancient worldview to you because it's a huge missing piece in our story and understanding why we even use the vocabulary we do, why we even care about things like astrology, et cetera, in any of these conversations. We don't have that anymore. So you need to let go of the postmodern reductionist materialism and that perceptual filter, break it apart by looking at it, here's a flag. Okay. I see what I'm doing. I'm trying to put this, quote unquote spiritual teaching into my postmodern, I need it to make sense to my materialism. And that's not what a lot of that stuff is predicated on. It flies in the face of that. So you need to go and trust your experience for a little while and then bring them together into a synthesis. These things never fit. Lock and key. They very rarely fit square peg into a round hole, but they can coexist with each other, having their own domains of authority. And you, again, having the responsibility intellectually and spiritually of being the mediator.
Yeah, analyzing both. Yeah,
exactly. And then making your decisions based on what you've had. It's like, but the thing is, a lot of people say, well, that doesn't match with my, my experience. It's like, you're limiting your experience because you don't believe that these things can happen. You haven't, that's what people come to me like, oh, I want to learn about magic. Well, do you believe in it? Well, I don't know. Well, go find somebody else.
It's going to make it pretty hard.
It's not going to reveal itself to you if you are unwilling to see it, or if you are unwilling to adopt a broader frame of view.
Yeah.
Right? Because the phenomenology of the magical, of the miraculous, exists outside of the bounds of reductionist, postmodern materialism, which is a perceptual filter. So you don't realize you're doing it, but you're putting blinders on. They're really being put on for you. And the rest of society, for the most part, the overwhelming majority, essentially corrals you into this belief. And they normalize it so that it's the air you're breathing, the water you're swimming in. Sure, and you don't even know that you're wearing these filters. You have no clue. So this is what's going on with spirituality, where we're stuffing it into a material or a spirituality by way of this alien thing. We are stuffing it into a materialist paradigm. Now, there are other things I want to say to expand upon that. But the second thing is that most of these people that are trying to squeeze it into religion, a lot of them, I'm assuming, from the arguments I've heard, because I've heard arguments about this, they have very little context. So they'll go in and they'll look at, certain texts like the books of Enoch, the book of Enoch, the Watchers and things like that. So it talks about the Nephilim and things of that nature.
That
and
one's heavily referenced. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But the thing is, they're ignoring a wealth of other spiritual sort of contemporaneous apocrypha, stuff in that milieu that was, the book of Enoch, the Watchers is apocrypha. It's not canon. And there's a wealth of that uses the same kind of, or similar or varying symbolic imagery to discuss these things. Okay. But ultimately, a lot of people don't have the context. They don't read or write Hebrew or Greek or Coptic.
Definitely. Yeah.
They don't understand that, if I were to literally translate this sentence for you, it would not make sense. No, seriously. A lot of this stuff is Enoch, sea, water, walk. It's not, they don't have the same syntax and grammar that the Anglophone, is used to, where it's like, oh, Enoch decided he wanted to go and walk by the sea, but it was, and think, and it was, he had to travel many miles. If I put this sentence together literally for you, it doesn't make fucking sense to a modern person. So what happens is you have these translators, and their skill is not only in knowing the language, but in rendering
what it meant then.
A coherent. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Not all translators do that. A lot of translators say, well, this new edition, this revised edition, this is more easily readable, more accessible for the modern reader. And it's like, well, now you've taken liberties. You've taken liberties and you've tainted the material. I see this a lot because I constantly have to reference Old Greek and Old Coptic, which I read and I write. And so it's, you look back and you're like, I look at I'll look at the Horan, the Cooper edition, and I'll look at the Jowett translation of the Platonic dialogues, and each one will say something completely differently. And then I'll look at what we do have of original texts, and I'll be like, okay, well, this one's kind of the closest, or this one, these two are they kind of make sense. People don't realize, they don't have the context that they're reading something that's been translated, retranslated. There's liberties. You don't even know what's being said. You think you have the facts, you have zero facts. So there's that problem of context. The third thing is the collective imagination and the rise of science fiction. Part of this contextual idea is that ancient people would have had no way of understanding aliens. They could not refer to them in the same way that we can.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're an invention of us.
Our time. Yeah.
Of our time. They're an invention of our time. Okay. It's the whole idea that aliens would even need to use technology is reductive. Is a product of our own sort of belief system. The thing is, around the 1940s and 50s, with the rise of things like NASA and which a lot of these guys came out of the the Third Reich. We took
Operation
guys
Paperclip.
And we put them down in Florida. Sure, like, okay, build us spaceships.
Gave real nice lives.
Yeah, build us rockets and things like that. So after that, and this agenda really kind of came to the fore about who was going to get into outer space and get to the moon first, and who's going to be the top dog in the Cold War, et cetera, et cetera. As these things developed, you saw people like Philip K. Dick. People don't realize Philip K. Dick's been writing since the 50s.
Yeah.
They know his work from like the 70s and stuff like that. He's been writing since the 50s.
Prolific. He was prolific even back then.
Absolutely. Yeah. Arthur C. Clarke, right?
Yep,
the guy who wrote 2001 Space Odyssey,
yep.
right? And a sequel to it. You get these authors that start writing this way. And what happens, it transfers over to comics. That transfers over to television. Things like Twilight Zone, things like Star Trek, it all arises in this time. And now we have an image that we've inherited of what space travel and aliens look like that's completely unique to our imagination.
Right.
We
just overlay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're just putting that on there. So the rise of science fiction as a genre is what is giving us the discrete mental images to make these inferences and these concepts. Okay? And what we're doing is we're mistaking those images for facts in and of themselves. This is the level of self-scrutiny most people are not willing or able to do. To look this deep into not only your own processes, but your collective fucking process and your history. So you want to ask big questions, you got to be willing to do big digging. You can't just, I saw 4 YouTube videos and this sounds pretty good. You've got to know this stuff. I'm pulling this shit out of my head right now. It's because it's already there. So like I said, I've mulled over these things. I've tackled them constantly again and again. I don't talk a lot about the alien thing because I'm not really interested in it.
Yeah.
But here's where it could dovetail. Why then do things come from the sky? Why do angels come from the sky? Why do the Nephilim, right? Nephel coming from the Semitic root to fall. Why do these things come from the sky then? I'll tell you exactly why, and this is what goes back to the ancient worldview. Suspend everything you think you know for just a moment and bear with me. Ancient peoples on this earth lived a very different type of existence than we do. We like to look at things like, Game of Thrones or this, that, and the other thing. And what we like to do is we like to paint these, everybody in the past with our brush. People live very, very different lives. Why? Because their internal mechanisms, their perceptual filters were almost entirely different.
Yeah.
So they didn't have clock on my wrist. I have a clock on my wrist. Okay. They didn't have on the corner of my screen here's a bunch of digital numbers. Most people don't even know how to fucking read this anymore. It's just number. Time is so important in all this because we don't understand time. Again, it's a product of science fiction. This idea that you can go backwards or forwards in time. You can't go backwards or forwards in time. Time is a measurement of unit or a unit of measurement. It's an anomaly in terms of measurement because we can't go backwards and we can't go forwards. You can imagine if I had a tape measure that I couldn't either retract or pull out. That's time. I can't, but we're measuring change. I was over there. I'm now over here. The sun was in the east. It's now in the west. What is the change that is? Well, it went from light to dark. and people, and people have a very, very strange idea of change in time and space. Time is predicated on space, literal space, not just outer space, any space. Because in order for there to be change, you need there to be space. And somebody said, well, what if I just was in a little vacuum sealed thing and I just sat there? Wouldn't I age? Wouldn't I grow old? Well, you'd die because you'd be completely abstracted from the symphony of interrelationships you need to survive. But again, what you're not understanding is that if I can be here in even if it's just I'm vacuum sealed, that's still space.
Yeah.
People have this idea that eternity, the eternal, is just a really long piece of linear time. Eternity is no time. It's outside of time because it's outside of space. Therefore, it's so much of everything in potential, it's effectively nothing. Okay? And it's from that nothing that space is created. And many, many different traditions have a different version of talking about it. In the Kabbalah, it's the tzimtzum. Right? The expansion and contraction of the light that creates the hull of what will become the universe, that the divine pours its essence as light into, to fill and to enliven. In the Platonic tradition, which the Kabbalah is based upon, the demiurge, which is the mythopoetic anthropomorphization, it's the figure, you got to turn it into like a human so that they can talk about it, representing the mind of God. And what he does is he creates space, and he calls it the moving image of eternity. Eternity doesn't move. There's no space. It's outside of time. I am going to make the moving image of eternity. And so what Plato says is that he looks into the divine and sees perfect forms there. And he begins to create. And the first thing he does, he takes two circles, the circle of the same and the circle of the different. And he pops them together to form like an X, like this. But no globe, just a space. What he's done there, and actually it's arranged like this. Okay? So that's it. This angle, this X, rather than like a T, that's important because ultimately, and the Timaeus mentions that specifically. What he's effectively doing is he's creating the paradigm, the blueprint for time. How did ancient people measure time? Where the sun was.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Not only on a diurnal cycle, is it day or is it night, but on an annual cycle, is it winter, is it fall, is it summer? Wherever the sun is, corresponds to some change here. And how they represented this system was the terrestrial equator and what's called the ecliptic, which is the apparent path of the sun in the sky, as viewed from the northern hemisphere, where these traditions were created, in Greece and Italy and Egypt and all these places. The sun doesn't do this, over the horizon. The sun doesn't kind of come up perfectly and go all the way from east to west. It does this. It slopes. It's only in the southern sky. That's why in a Masonic hall, as you know, the north is in darkness, because the ecliptic moves on an angle. It moves obliquely. The sun is always in the south in the northern hemisphere. So what he's doing in creating these two circuits is he's showing the sun's path and the earth, the rotation of the earth, or like establishing this is the terrestrial and this is the celestial. Why? Because when they looked at all this stuff, that was what was corresponding to the change. It made the change. It's the difference between morning, afternoon, and night. Yeah. Coolness, hotness, dryness, winter, fall, all of it. And then there were even other planets and stars that signified the inundation of important waterways that would fertilize the fields and help them grow crops and things to that effect. The lunar cycle, that's where we get the word month from, Mund. Yep. So these people saw creation as a mechanistic wheelwork. It was like if I were to open this up and show you the gears, and the gears were the planets, and the planets were effectively the rulers, the archons, the archontes, the cosmocrators, the creators, the governors of the cosmos. Why? Because these planets, they make the order. Everything that happens here has to do with where they are, or at least so that it appeared that way. So they ascribed some form of higher intelligence to these planets, which they called the gods. These were the gods, right? I mean, you go back even to ancient Babylonian texts, and that's the body of Marduk. Yeah. That's the body of Inanna. Proclus talks about it. Iamblichus talks about it. Yes, they're the physical phenomenon, but like my soul and my intellect are tied to my body. Theirs is more disconnected. They can move their body without their intelligence existing inside of it. So this is the way the ancient philosophers, the Neoplatonists and the Hermetists, thought about this mechanism. And that's why things come from the sky. Because the divine is out there creating the order. It's associated with the wheelwork of the, not because aliens came. It's that things come from the sky. It's because they looked at the mechanism, the wheelwork of the universe, saw that everything had to do with the planets, and so that must be where the power is.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely makes sense. It makes me think of the very well-known, hang on. Let's see if I can track this image down.
Yeah, and there's a couple more things. I'm gonna bookmark it so you can pull this thing up.
It's this is the image that I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Well, so that would be the you see the wheelwork there exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it. And that's what they saw the cosmos as being, and so therefore they looked at everything as nested spheres. It does not have to do with the fact that actual beings came down from the clouds. It's about, well, where else would they come from?
That's external influence.
Yeah, it appears that there is an external influence acting upon us from that direction. So it's that's why these things are said to come down. And the other thing is angels. It's like, well, the angel came down. Angels are mentioned by name twice in the entire Bible. Michael and Gabriel. Angelos, which is the Greek Septuagint translation of, I believe, Melach. It just means messenger. It doesn't mean anything else. The term angel is applied to humans in the Bible, some humans. If they come as these, what we would call, synchronicities and signs and people that God sent.
A carrier of a message.
That's an angel.
Gotcha. Yeah.
According to the Bible. The seraphim and the cherubim that Ezekiel describes, not angels. Nowhere are they referred to as angels. It's a later theological conception that the Christians, the patristic writers did. They lumped all this shit into, because they were creating a spiritual hierarchy. If anybody's interested in that, they could look at somebody called Pseudo-Dionysius. He imported what we call Neoplatonic hierarchies of intelligences into Christianity. And so they had to, in the pagan Neoplatonic and Hermetic systems, there were hypercosmic gods, end-cosmic gods, liberated gods in this hierarchy. Can't do that in Christianity because Christians can't call anything else God. Yeah. You can't have gods, so you got to replace them with something. Okay, what are we going to call this thing? Well, that's the cherub, and these are the seraphim, and that's not the names they originally had. The cherubim, and the seraphim, and nowhere are they referred to as angels. So the term angel, again, is like this collective imaginative image that does not actually exist on the historical record. The way we're thinking of the angel with wings and coming down from it doesn't say that anywhere. It does not define what an angel is. This is a later interpretation that has effectively poisoned our ability to understand the truth. And then the final thing that I would say is that I do not doubt entirely the existence of angels or aliens, but I posit what I call the multidimensional hypothesis is that angels, angelic intelligences, whatever you want to call them, disembodied intelligences that present to the mind's eye in some form or fashion that you can communicate with, the beings we work with in ceremonial. The hypothesis is that these things exist. Their existence is very different from ours because they don't necessarily have or need to have a physical body. Our soul, is stuck. Literally in the Platonic tradition and the Hermetic tradition, they call the body is the tomb of the soul. Literally.
Accurate. Yeah.
Literally. The body is the tomb of the soul. And the entire trajectory of initiation is waking the soul up from its, slumber, its hypnotism, its forgetfulness, while still in a body. Instead of dying and then having to go through that hall of judgment period where your soul, now finally awake and freed from the fetters and illusions of the body, looks back on its life and said, Jesus, I totally fucked up. I totally botched this job. That overwhelming sense of regret that doesn't render the heart light like a feather, but very, very heavy. That is hell. That is your judgment. You're judging you. And so the goal in initiation is to wake that up before you die so that you can change your life, be reborn. Literally, when the soul is making decisions and not the persona, that is, you ask me how I do what I do, to some degree, I have accomplished part of that process. Because that's what's doing it. It's not me. Anytime I take the wheel, I drive the car into a ditch, so I'm guided by that process, which I'm very thankful for. But what we do in the entirety of magic, I think, is very similar to some of these stories of communication, of contact. I think that there is a potential for these things to be, all of them, a whole plethora, maybe, that maybe one day we'll categorize the same way we've done to butterflies and beetles and things like that. But disembodied intelligences that find their existence toggling through dimensions. But we as human beings, as souls in bodies, have a way of interacting with all of these. And it's through what Iamblichus would have called the fantasia, or really the intelligent imagination. The imaginal faculty. So Henry Corbin, he did all this research on ancient texts and of ancient Iraq and Islamic stuff, and he said, you know what, this word that keeps appearing here that I'm translating to mean imagination, it's our stigma has ruined that word for application to early spiritual texts. So he coined the term imaginal faculty, because that was a better way. It's just the image-making faculty. And what I've tried to do in the new book that I'm putting out, Mythology, is show that the imagination is not only something that is creative, but it is something that is perceptive. It is an organ of spiritual perception when you learn how to use it. So these various organs of spiritual perception, I think, are what allow us to communicate in big ways with these hyper or multidimensional beings. But again, even that term, hyperdimensional, multidimensional, I'm abstracting it from some sci-fi theoretical quantum physics, but I have, there's really no other way for me to reference it so that the average listener will understand it. But what I'm really trying to say is just disembodied intelligences. They exist. They're out there, and actually they can work on you in very subtle ways. They can make you you can think a thought is yours when in reality there's something much more subtle and complex happening. And I think some of this is exactly what's happening when people say, well, I've been communicating with entities. Philip K. Dick talked about how he used to communicate, he used to get messages. It could be just a disembodied intelligence that has decided to fuck with you.
Well, and this is going to be my next question. Now, that has been kind of baked into the story for a long time. Werner von Braun has been on record for a long time having said he was communicating with the others, and that's what helped them develop a lot of advanced rocket science. There's an interesting tangent with NASA, at least. There's a whole argument. Basically, there's this woman named Diana Pasulka, and Diana Pasulka is a like Catholic religious studies person, and she kind of put her lens on the whole alien conversation. But she met a couple people that were pretty influential with NASA, and apparently there's some lore as to why they used Latin names for the rockets, and like there's like a ceremonial element to how they would do stuff at NASA that is kind of baked in there in a weird way through Jack Parsons, who I'm sure you're aware of, right? So there's like this weird idea that maybe even from its inception, like the Americans' rocketry program has had the underpinnings of occult or religious practice as part of sending stuff into space. It never gets elaborated on beyond that, but it, that's why they chose the specific names for the programs based on what those programs are doing. And a lot of those people, and these are like hardline NASA scientist people, not the hippies, not crystal gazers. You know what I mean? Like there's real serious people. A lot of them would say something to the effect of, I have this ritual that I practice every day. For some people, it's just as simple as I eat this, I drink this at this time and do these things then. And at some point in the day, the gateway opens and I can communicate with these individuals, right? Mm-hmm. There's also a new thing that's happened in the past couple months where a pretty large group of, again, very serious, connected to the military people are saying that they're using their thoughts to summon aliens or to like bring UFO craft into existence. And maybe about a year ago, that was not like the whole, if you were a person talking about aliens or like communicating with aliens, you were like immediately crackpot. Yeah. But in the past 6 months, it's now turned into like every asshole that has a story about communicating with aliens is now like being taken super seriously. So again, like as you were talking about the what communicating with whatever that intelligence is, that conversation has ramped up considerably. And this is considerably in the past year. And this is all still kind of separate, but kind of also connected to like remote viewing or the Monroe Institute or like putting your brain into this specific state where it might open you up to these kinds of experiences.
Well, and there's a danger to that because you don't know what's coming in.
That's for sure.
It can tell you it is whatever it wants to. But the thing is, most people are so enamored of having the experience that they just take it on. Yeah, I talked to an alien today. You believe that, honey? Pass the gravy. So it's like,
well, in some ways it's similar to a lot of people that will say they're using magic or ceremony to and are they? Do they even understand it?
Well, that's the thing. Do people who even practice ceremonial understand it? Because there are people out there that'll go and be like, oh, I summoned this thing. It's like, well, how do you know? How do you know? You're working, and I'm somebody who practices this stuff, but the difference between magic and things like mediumism is intentionality. The whole idea of something like Golden Dawn magic that I practice or Hermetic Kabbalistic magic is based on this idea that I'm going to create a container, and that container is going to be structured so that only what I call can come in, and then whatever ends up being there, I'm going to test. And even then, I don't know conclusively, or conclusively. It's the height of folly to think that you can communicate with a disembodied intelligence, something quote unquote on the other side of the veil, and not be at an egregious disadvantage.
Yeah.
You are at a horrific disadvantage to that thing. I mean, even the ancient philosophers talked about it. We have it in the Chaldean oracles. They refer to the dog-faced spirits who never show true form to mortal gaze. There's just too much that can and really does go wrong when people are that credulous about, and that's the whole thing. Some people might be listening to me, man, be like, this guy talks about angels, he talks about magic, and he's calling people credulous. Well, again, I use critical thinking as an instrument to deconstruct everything, including modernism and postmodernism, all this rational structure. The thing that has, if anything, proven itself to me, almost beyond the shadow of a doubt, is that intelligence can exist without having a body. How do you communicate with it? With your mind. There are multiple aspects of it. They would have called them the powers of the soul in ancient times. It's the imaginal, it's the abstract, it's the mental. The entire universe is going through this filter. Music is only sine waves of air with proportionate ratios. That's all it is until the phenomenology happens. And it hits my eardrum and my brain interprets it as something beautiful. So the powers of the soul are not to be underestimated. But on the same token, you do have to learn some technique for dealing with these things. You don't know what you're dealing with. You have no idea what you're doing. And I believe that most of these people, or maybe a majority, some majority, whether it be slender or otherwise, are actually having sincere communications, but they don't know they don't know that, like, that's our territory. And I'm not saying like, that's our turf, but it's like, if you're going to start doing this, you got to start reading and learning from people like us, so that you can at least have a little bit, it's like getting in a boat and you don't even know how to drive a car, so you've got to learn a little bit. I would suggest that. But yeah, I mean, I think I've covered most of my thoughts about, what aliens can or cannot or are and aren't. And again, I have to exercise epistemological humility and say, like, look, I could be totally wrong about all this stuff. But I would say that if I had to put money on it, I'm not a betting man. If I had to put money on it, I would say it's probably just another form of psychological torment.
I mean, this is why I wanted to ask you this stuff, because I've seen so many people talk about it. Definitely nobody who even comes close to qualified talk about it, and not really expand on it beyond just like, oh, there's this spooky connection. The reason I told you that story about that documentary Mirage Man and that guy Richard Doty is because the past year I've been really going extra hard on especially in the UFO space. I too am open to it all. I would love for there to be aliens, but I also know enough about the military and private industry and know that it makes just as much sense for the military to get everyone talking about aliens if it means risking exposing classified stuff. And when we look back at the history, military has had zero problem running disinformation campaigns for this exact reason, to keep our secret shit secret. And I can't help but think, when I hear a lot of people talking about the religious or esoteric connection to it, to me, it just feels like a diversionary tactic. Mm-hmm. All right, well, you're not going to buy that it's aliens. What about if it's angels and demons? How about that? Exactly. You don't like that? What about magic? Yeah, let's do magic.
Well, and I mean, the people that are like foaming at the mouth to completely rid modern society of all forms of religion are, they are utilizing a narrative which has been created for us, which says that religion is the source of much, if not all, the evil in the world. When at the end of the day, that would be, where is this coming from? Where is that narrative? Where's that party line? Where's that mantra that we've just, it's like, it's almost like it's been poured into our mouth like so much water that it's coming out of our fucking nose and ears at this point. It's such a cliche. We've been so browbeaten with this idea to affirm and confirm our biases against, essentially whatever we dislike about religion or the religious. But we are religious people. And there is such a thing as religious activity. And that religious activity is going to be applied in one area or another. And to abstract ourselves from the idea of religion as something which can develop the soul is fucking deadly for the human race. to destroy, to make religion about some form of technological advancement or ecological, which is important, but not the fucking main priority, but to then completely to rip the numinous, the spiritual, the metaphysical out of religion. I mean, that's the final death, of the old world and of probably of the possibility for any good happening here. Because then now you have a religion of reductionism, of scientism, which is, it's about these aliens, and it's about that's who came, and they're, they just have this crazy technology, and so that's the direction we got to go. I mean, technologically, we got to. So what is giving this to us? Really, what it is it's the modern power structures. The marriage of corporatism, of the corporate entities with politics, mass media, and the educational institutions. These are the things that have the most money in the world. And they all, it's whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Chinese, whether you are in America, whether you're in Canada, there's only really there's one line in this world that separates us. And it's the powerful elite and everyone else.
Yeah.
Those people are the only people that we should be going after. Not forget MAGA, forget the COVID people who want you to get your boosters. Forget it. Forget all that. There's one group of people that you need that if we need to get involved with politics, if that has to happen, that's who we should be looking at. And what's the best way to really do that is just to tune out, is just to opt out. Yeah. Opt out of that game, of that messaging. Because what they're doing with religion is they're saying that it's religion's problem. It's a human problem. It's a power problem. And those people are in power and they want more. So what effectively strips power structures of their structure? People who are willing to opt out. And most of the time, those are people who are more concerned with the spiritual than the material. And people who are the entire message of Buddha, the entire message of Christ, the entire message of these spiritual messengers is to walk away from the wisdom, quote unquote, of the world. And they don't want that. So that would be like, me trying to snake your job and convincing everybody that works for you that you're a real asshole. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to be probably fucking worse, when they decide to kick your ass out of here. But, that's really the dichotomy that's going on. So but again, not to get too gloom and doom, I do think that there is a measure of hope, but we can't get lost in this rage bait against religion, which I see this as an attack on religion.
Well, I mean, that's kind of why I'm bringing it up, because it's like, what does this mean? What does this increased focus and now new fervor, possibly from a bunch of people that didn't give a shit about it a minute ago, into religion and esoteric traditions because they want to be closer to aliens? What does that mean for both of these things? Having new people being interested, but coming into it thinking like it's the religion of aliens, or it's the mystery tradition of aliens.
Yeah, and they've effectively primed us for that in this, by giving everybody this. They poison the watering hole of spirituality with New Age. What I like to call spiritual psychosis. So it's everything. I talk about this in the preface, and Jamie Paul Lamb, the great Masonic author and astrologer, he wrote it. He wrote about it at some length in the foreword to that book. But A Formless Fire, my first book, the foreword and the preface and the introduction all discuss how there was a a tradition that descended from antiquity. It was a group of traditions, really. It wasn't a single one. It wasn't uniform, but they were all interrelated. It was like a family of traditions that came down. And then around the, really corresponding to the Industrial Revolution and modernism, around the late 19th century, really early to mid 20th century, you start getting this infusion of what we call, now we call it the New Age. And it essentially perverts and inverts a lot this ancient family of traditions by co-opting a lot of its philosophies and then sliding its hand in there, and mixing this, like you say, these crystal gazers along with, aliens and, people channeling ancient Egyptian gods to tell you about, we're in 5D, man. It's like, where are you getting these fucking terms from? These things like star seeds and the Pleiadians. People nowadays, you get things like Gaia TV, where they're making you feel like if you come into the spiritual dialogue, that this is the vernacular. This is what we hold to be true. This is not what we hold to be true. But zero of it. That's where you go to literally have spiritual psychosis. Yeah. You literally will go there to chase your fucking tail and get stoned out of your gourd for the rest of your life. And you won't have a fucking clue. So now that kind of brain rot has attached itself to spiritual communities, it's like a primer. It's like, the next obvious step is to just move aliens into the picture. I don't know. I can't.
Well, that's interesting. I've never even thought about that, but it's interesting you bring that up because, quite literally from the inception of New Age movement shit, aliens they have been forcing those two things together. Like New Age is like wave one of the disillusionment. And aliens is wave two, free energy is wave three, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a really good way of putting it in terms, I think, that people can understand. Like those waves. I really like that. The New Age was like one of the first waves of that sort of buy-in, that long con.
Well, the commercialization of the metaphysical. Yeah,
exactly.
Like that. The argument that you're making there makes a lot of sense, you having explained that.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to not see that now,
Yeah, and that it's a huge thing. And that's why those communities are still, they have this weird, everybody loves Alex Gray and the Flower of Life. It's like it's a miniature cult in and of itself.
Cosm. I did that. It's literally a cult upstate. It's like a whole art.
Don't get me wrong. I love Alex and Allison Gray, but
sure, 100%. It's cool to start, but that vibe exists up there. That's like a zealotry its own,
Yeah. Well, it's an egregore. These things are powerful egregores. The New Age, especially the direction it's moving in under the guidance of fucking something like Gaia TV. That's an egregore. And the thing is, they prop up people that sound really, to the uneducated, or I will say the uninformed, I should say. To the uninformed, these people that they prop up there sound very, very scholastic, scholarly. I don't know. But if you know, which I encourage everybody to do their own research, but you got to do it a certain way. You can't just be relying on Wikipedia. That stuff changes every month.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a broader context. Sure, start with Wikipedia. Find a few ideas. Then go to the references.
Look at the references.
Look at those books.
Get those books.
Those books. See what Amazon then, people who bought this book also buy this book. Look at the customer reviews. Read the dust jacket. Do a little, be discerning about your mental diet. The same way you got to curate your physical diet, curate your mental diet, and then you'll be able to see right through these people. The sheepskin that the wolves all wear is so thin, we see right through. And that's how you render that stuff cognizable, and you can tell a bullshit artist is when it's like, I don't need anybody to tell me what the Book of Enoch the Watcher says. I don't need anybody to tell me what the Secret Book of John says. I've read it. And I've read it in multiple languages, so it's, you got to get to that place nowadays. Why? Because there's a war on information. There's a war on information. We talked about people having no privacy. People have no idea, like the deep fakes, the AI stuff, that's not even coming. It's here. And this whole psyop with like the Mandela effect and, was Sinbad in that movie? It's another way of gaslighting you into thinking that you cannot trust your memory. You cannot trust yourself. It's all just these waves, like you're saying, of preparing you for what's coming, which is eventually, most likely old videos will be altered.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, the historic record will be altered, and you will have no way. You won't trust yourself. You'll have no way of getting that. We're not going to own anything anymore, right? Everything's going to be a subscription service. I don't have books anymore. I don't have, music anymore. It's in the fucking cloud, and they can change it whenever they feel like it. So I don't own anything physical. I don't really know what I have in the first place. So and for me, it's not even this alarmist paranoia. I mean, it's so fucking obvious that if you don't see it, something very, very bad must have happened to your brain. Like if you see this at this point.
This is an argument I've argued with myself a million times. I went deep down the rabbit hole of hypnosis, and I read a ton of books from the 50s and 60s when hypnosis was still being used as like a credible option to anesthetics, or painkillers.
Right.
And after I went down that rabbit hole, it was really hard for me to look at anything, especially in like on radio, on TV. It was hard for me to look at anything as not being some kind of low level hypnosis. And there's also the idea in hypnosis that you have to want to be hypnotized. And this is why I always go back to that thing. I'd rather the uncomfortable truth to a comfortable lie. But most people want the comfortable lie. And from my perspective, that is them granting permission to be hypnotized, right? And I mean this literally. Like, some of the tactics that are used in hypnotism are the same tactics they use in advertising. There's like a 1-to-1 correlation there. And again, like, that's not even really getting into like MK Ultra, where the government spent a bunch of money experimenting with hypnosis to see if they could get people to behave in certain ways, behavior modification.
Yeah.
So there's a part of me that's like, I am angry that everyone is this way. But then there's a part of me that's like, well, it's not necessarily, if you don't know you're being hypnotized, and you're being hypnotized by people who fully fundamentally understand the process of behavior modification, does that count? It's still your responsibility to remove yourself from it, but how the infrastructure that exists to modify our behavior is so great.
Yeah.
How does a person start to do that?
Well, here's the thing, right? There's a Latin phrase, and the origins of it are contested, but certainly not its truth. And it is mundus vult decipi. Mundus vult decipi. That means the world invites deception. People do want to be deceived. They want to be entertained. Look at when you go to a movie, man. I mean,
there's a prime example. That's hypnosis. We're going in there. We're going in there. We're abandoning all sense of. We're suspending disbelief.
Exactly.
And
buying
for that short period of time, that is our reality.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. And that's why, like, look, there's 50 to 100 feet between me and this massive screen. There's a bunch of people's big heads. The whole place smells like a wet dog and popcorn. And my seat's creaking. Yet for some reason, I'm still so engaged with what's happening that I can jump scare. Or I can say, no, or I could laugh, belly laugh. It's hypnosis. This is why television, all that stuff is absolute garbage. I didn't watch television for probably over a decade. I didn't watch television, my friend, for over a decade. And it's to the point now where when I do occasionally watch TV, I can't even help myself. My fiance's like, why? What are you doing? Because anytime a commercial comes on, I change the channel and say, fuck you. You know? Like just so angry. Go fuck yourself. Change, you know, because it's such a disgusting insult to intelligence, really.
It sure is. It sure is.
So, you know, it's all that hypnosis. But my thing is that, I look to Plato, and I look specifically to his allegory of the cave in Book 7 of the Republic. Okay? A lot of people have the story summarized, but there are details that they miss that are really important. The allegory of the cave is the blueprint, the paradigm, the archetype for Western initiation. Okay? There is a group of prisoners. That's how Socrates refers to them. Plato's Socrates, prisoners. And they are chained facing a wall of the cage, so that not only are their limbs shackled, but they can't move their heads. They can only look forward at the wall. Behind them is a roadway. And above that roadway is a big fire, like behind it. As these guardians, the people who are effectively keeping them there, as these guardians walk and move across the roadway, they pass in front of this big fire and project like a movie screen light and shadow on that wall, which is the only thing that the prisoners can look at. And so the prisoners mistake these shapes for the reality. They know nothing. And Socrates says they have been this way from birth. From birth. There was never a time where they weren't shackled like in that direction. So they can't even cognitively understand the realities that are projecting the shadow and light that they're interpreting as reality. The causal factors of their reality, they cannot understand. They do not possess the cognitive functions. That's us. You know, now what happens is one of the prisoners doesn't just turn and say, guys, we got to get out of here. No, how could they? If this is all they knew, then it's like, guys, this is it. This is great. You know, we love this existence.
We got it all.
Yeah, we got it. It's especially nice when something really cool moves on the wall and we mistake that for reality, you know, but what Socrates says is that, and he's kind of ambiguous about this, but he doesn't tell us who. But he in his hypothetical situation, he says a prisoner would be unchained. Now, the prisoner doesn't run for cover. Prisoner wants to stay where he is. Socrates uses verbiage like pushed, shoved,
compelled.
He is literally, you know, they turn and they want to go under this roadway that everybody's walking over because there's some diffused light entering the cave. So you follow that, the true light, not the false light of the ruddy flame, but the true light. And you got to crawl under the overpass and make this harrowing ascent into the light of day. And the prisoner doesn't do that willingly. They are pushed and shoved and cajoled the entire time by some entity, some guardian of theirs. And then finally, when they're in the light of day, they're not like, oh, this is great, let's make a picnic. They can't see anything. They're completely blinded. It hurts. It's awful. You know, and they gotta
They've been in darkness their entire existence.
Exactly. Yeah. And then after a while, their eyes adjust. And then again, you know, they want, oh, great, this is great, I'm staying up here. Socrates says, nope, our people will have to be compelled to come back down because they have to try and help the other prisoners and bring them back to reality. But you know what those prisoners are going to do to that person? They're going to kill him. You know, so it's like that is the paradigm of initiation, and it's true of our greatest spiritual stories, I think. And the irony there, I love that you brought up the allegory of the cave, because that
one in specific has been referenced. Like they're like trying to completely co-opt that story to be a part of the aliens. Like, it's like, yeah, dude, seriously, in that space right now, it's like,
people are brain
if you
dead.
don't understand that they're aliens, then you need to read Plato's Allegory of the Cave because it explains it all. It's so, it is, the past year in that space has been frustrating because this is stuff that people have been talking about for a very long time. And to me, it's just clear that they're trying to attach it and co-opt.
Yeah, it's everything now. Yeah,
it's like, you know, what the analysis that the alien space, the alien conversation, the modern alien conversation is in itself a new religion becomes realer every day. You know. Yeah,
and you know, another wave of that is like all these fucking Dan Brown movies and National Treasure movies where everything's a puzzle and everything ties in and it's all
encoded in the paintings.
Yeah, just like I stole the Declaration of Independence and it told me that aliens are in the White House. You know, like it's but here's the thing, right? My thing is like, I kind of understand how a person could become hypnotized to the point of, you know, just wanting to have a house and a job and a car.
Sure.
And just saying like, okay, I'm going to pay my taxes. I could see why somebody would do that. It's an illusion. It's still a cage. That's not actual freedom the way that we had it, right? Especially not after the banks bought up everything, and now you need a credit card to afford everything. You know, you start putting cars on credit cards and doing financing, and usury destroys everything. That's why it's been outlawed in every major civilization from the beginning of time, except for ours somehow. So,
well, we're going to do it right.
Yeah, nobody gives a fuck about doing it right. They just care about like, well, it's good for capitalism. You know, it's good. It's going to make everybody happy, you know, and it's just a lie that they pitch. But I could see why people would get behind that lie because still, it's an okay existence. What is not surprising to me, but what is I think a more interesting question to me is why are all these little pockets of communities becoming so invested in these absolutely outrageous ideas that have no historical, philosophical basis? For somebody to say, look at the Allegory of the Cave about aliens, it means they had to have watched a YouTube video or even worse, an Instagram reel about that. And then went and read it and said, whoa, you know, like confirm their own biases. Because I've read 24 out of the 35 or 37 Platonic dialogues. And the only way you can understand any of the dialogues is by reading the other ones. Because it's an ongoing, evolving conversation.
It's a dialogue.
Literally. It's like he was literally fleshing these things out. And it's very self-referential. It relies on you knowing these terms and these ideas and what he's talking about. Nowhere does he ever even infer the possibility of aliens. So that is absolutely egregious. And what I'm seeing is that and I think part of it was this whole conspiracy. And don't get me wrong. For anybody that's listened to me, they know that I have some opinions that some people might say, well, he's an alarmist or he's a conspiracy theorist. But I do think that the real conspiracy is a bunch of people believing that those with wealth and power would not conspire to get more. Yeah. That to me is much more the leap of faith. Yeah. A and B, you know, there was a mass psychosis enacted on us with this. I think at some point when certain truths became their release or their widespread knowledge became unavoidable, there became a concerted effort to, instead of trying to combat it, but lean into it, right? It's like COINTELPRO of the 1950s, counterintelligence program. You infiltrate and then feed them dog shit from the inside out. And you destroy it from the inside. And so the conspiracy theories began getting so far-fetched and so urgent and alarmist, and the lies just became bigger and bigger, that people, they question everything. Now, here's the problem. It's good to look at things critically, but like just like saying like everything's a lie, man, that's not critical thinking. You know, there's an interface. There's a model for how to think critically and how to examine these things. And so you bring that coupled with, you know, your own perspective, and you these are not things that you figure out in a month. Critical thinking is a process that doesn't end. You do it the rest of your life. And it's not this Santa Claus syndrome. I was lied to. Nothing's real. You know, it's that, I think, brought us to a point where we had no more roots invested in our reality. And now it's just like people are willing.
Whatever story's the most ridiculous.
Which one's the craziest? Yeah. Which one's the most outlandish? Because it's like, you know, it's all these things working in concert to really just create an interior fantasy world that all of us want to occupy. You know, when we're on Instagram, we're cosplaying. You know, you're not seeing my life. Right. You're not seeing what I'm actually doing. Yeah. I'm presenting something to you.
It's curated just for you. Yeah.
It's marketed. And I'm pretending. You know, I'm altering the reality. The rise of things like Dungeons and Dragons, the rise of things like the Comic-Con, the rise of things like these cosplay groups and things like that. People, and more escapist, fully immersive. You can now binge 13 hours of this fantasy epic. You know, like it's escapism. People are just trying to escape through this shit. But the problem is that they don't even 100% realize it. So, you know, everything requires a very fine line to walk. And to be honest, I'm not even sure I'm doing it right all the time. But you got to remain grounded in something. And I remain grounded in the things that have been classically considered grounding, you know, particularly things like Platonist philosophy, Stoic philosophy, even Aristotelianism and that kind of stuff. I ground myself in the wisdom of the ancients. I meet them on their terms, rather than trying to interpolate, right, or interpret things that just read things into the text that aren't there. But you know, sometimes a lot of the important stuff has been washed out, so you do have to go and find that, you know, find those inroads and do that work. You can't be lazy if you want to be intellectually responsible. And so, but that's how I keep myself grounded, because they're, you know, and like you said, right, playing music, sitting there and zoning out. Like I still play guitar. It's been incredibly long since I've held a pair of drumsticks, but I'll pick up the guitar for the same reason, like you said, just to zone out, but also be, you know,
using this somehow, you know.
Playing guitar is an active zoning out. So really what it is it's a hyper tuning in. Whereas something like TV is passive. So you're just zoned out, you're hypnotized. You can hypnotize yourself playing guitar, right? Or with a melody, you can do like a trance thing, but there's an active participation that is actually making you hyper present. It's uniting you with that sound to some degree. You and it, you are both perceiving and creating it. And it's like this loop that does something incredible to the brain. So it's not really zoning out. It's being hyper present. And so, you know, I will engage in things like that to keep me grounded. And a huge thing, I think a big thing, and this is, I'll end on that, but the big thing is that you got to get off your fucking phone. You've got to get off the internet. You've got to delete your TikTok. You've got to stay off of it, do an Instagram detox for a month. Go out, touch grass, see the beauty, be present, and you'll realize that once you pull your head out of this gigantic digital ass, that the world is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. And at the very least, when you look down, you know the ground that you stand on.
Dude, I love that. I don't know if there's a better way to end this this session of us getting deep into it. That was perfect. I completely agree with all of that. There's so many layers of our existence now that are being sold to us as if they're mandatory, and 90% of them are not. Right. So, just making sure to always prioritize those. The rest of this shit, this fun, immediate access to information and media, that's not a requirement. That's an amenity. So, yeah. But dude, thank you again for coming on. I was really excited to get your take on that because, again, like I've seen so many people talk about this overlap and how it's all connected, but they don't include anybody with the background or context of the mystic traditions. And
did you basically know which side I was gonna take?
I felt pretty confident. Well, I mean, that's why I wrote all these questions down and I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna rip for sure. But it's pretty much checking off where I thought we were gonna go, and I'll definitely I don't want to wait to have you back on. I want to have you back on because I also want to. There's a whole bunch of other questions I wanted to ask you about, Greek, interpreting Greek, and especially when it comes to religion and the ideas in that space, and the disagreements and agreements. And I'd love to. I have tried to go into decent histories or try and give context to how OTO and Crowley and Jack Parsons fit into not just the alien story, but just into esotericism as a whole. A lot of my friends who have started to go down these paths, they'll inevitably come across that stuff and they'll be either scared of it or intimidated. And I always have to explain to them, it's just, you have to understand his history and the history that the contributions that he made to that space. It is important. You don't necessarily need to be a member of OTO, but it's important to remember that history. I don't know if you'd be interested in any of those things, but I'd love to have you back on for those.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is right in my wheelhouse. So I'd love to come on whenever you have me, man. I really enjoy talking with you.
Love it. Folks, the links to all of Ike's works will be in the description. Be sure to check them out. If you got the time, maybe head out to Egypt. That's going to be pretty epic. Are there any other things you want to give a shout out before we wrap up?
Anything else? Well, I've got the Arcanum channel, and I'm starting to little by little produce more documentary information, presentations there. I've been doing a podcast on it for a long time. I have a lot of scholars on. I have a lot of practitioners and authors in the fields of esotericism and the occult and things of that nature. But I started out doing long format documentary stuff, how-tos and the history, theory, and practice of the stuff, and I'm getting back into it. So I'm going to release another one called "What is Rosicrucianism?" Should be in the next month. I'll get that up there. So check out the Arcanum, ARCANVM, the Arcanum channel on YouTube. And for podcasts, and look out for the latest documentary. And again, the website's ikebaker.com. If you want to talk to me, just type something into that little chat widget in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and that'll come directly to my inbox.
Love it. Dude, thank you again for coming on. This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, folks. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. See y'all.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, The End, with your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva.
That's obnoxious.
Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva.
Literally no one cares.
For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business, or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod.
When will this end?
Thank you for listening. Now get back to work.
Move it along.